It's so disheartening knowing what needs to change, wanting it deeply, yet not being able to get yourself to follow through. You see the unhealthy habits, recognize the self-sabotaging patterns, the ways you avoid, shrink, lash out, overdo, disconnect, whatever that is for you. And you know it's not serving you. You don't want to keep going down that same road, and yet you can't seem to stop yourself. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Elizabeth Judith, courage coach and the creator of the Loving Discipline Method. And I'm here for the brave, evolving hearts who want to break free from those nasty patterns that are keeping them stuck. So in today's video, I'm going to unpack what's really going on beneath the surface, why willpower and traditional discipline repeatedly fail us in these moments, and what we actually need to create real, lasting change. So let's get to it. You know the saying, when you know better, you do better? I don't know about you, but for the longest time, I hated that quote. I absolutely adore Maya Angelou who said it, but that quote always rubbed me the wrong way because for me, it wasn't true. I felt like it should be true, but it didn't match my experience. Yeah, sure, there were times when I didn't know better and then I'd have to learn through experience. I'd mess up, I'd learn, and then I'd do better. Nothing wrong with that. That's growth. That's good, right? But what about all those times when I did know better and yet clearly continued to choose not to do better? When I thought about those times through the lens of that quote, I felt awful. It could really throw me into a dark shame cycle because if I know better but repeatedly choose to do it anyway, what does that say about me? For decades, I thought it said that I was bad, I was broken, weak, or fundamentally incapable of change. Maybe you've thought that too. A lot of us do. But here's what I know now. The quote's not wrong. Of course it's not wrong. It's Maya Angelou. The woman was an absolute sage. But it doesn't tell the whole story. It speaks as if we're one unified self, when in fact, as many psychologists now recognize, we're actually made up of multiple inner parts. So although there was a part of me that did in fact know better, there were also other parts, the ones actually driving my habits, reactions, and behaviors that didn't know better yet. And that's key, because when the part of you in charge doesn't know better yet, it won't do better yet, no matter how much the rest of you wants to. This idea of inner parts is nothing new. For decades, psychologists have recognized that the mind isn't one solitary voice, but a system of distinct parts. Carl Jung called them subpersonalities, describing them as having their own motives, desires, memories, emotions, perspectives, personality traits, strategies, and beliefs. One of the most helpful models I've come across for understanding and working with our inner parts, and the one I follow the most closely, is Internal Family Systems, IFS for short, created by Dr. Richard Schwartz. Schwartz teaches that having these multiple parts is completely natural, that we come into this world with our own healthy, harmonious inner family made up of these different aspects of self. Each part has its own way of being in the world, its own gifts, its own voice, its own healthy role to play. These parts aren't learned, conditioned, or imposed. They arise from within. They're not in the way of who we are. They are us. They are pure, authentic expressions of the whole. One part might be bold and adventurous, another steady and grounded. One might carry joy, another provides structure and sensitivity or play. And because each part is connected to the self, it naturally draws on that wisdom. So there's no inner conflict blocking you from acting on what you know. That doesn't mean you'll always get it perfect. We're all still learning and growing, but the choices you make will come from a place of wholeness instead of conflict. That is, until something happens. As babies and young children, we are 100% dependent on our caregivers to get our needs met. If our caregivers reject and abandon us, we don't survive. They're our lifeline. That's why we humans are hardwired for attachment, for deep emotional connection with the people our lives depend upon. Before we even understand language, we are exquisitely wired to track every signal in that relationship. We notice the tone of voice and the facial expressions and begin to learn what brings more connection and what threatens it, what brings approval and validation and what might result in rejection, disapproval, or distress. And it's not just our physical needs we depend on our caregivers to meet. We rely on them to help us make sense of our world, to guide us in understanding and processing our experiences and emotions, to reflect our value and sense of self, and to affirm that our authentic self is inherently good, lovable, and welcome. Bottom line, that it's safe to be ourselves, because ultimately we are meant to live as the full, free, authentic expression of who we really are. That's part of our wiring too. But here's where it gets interesting. If we are wired for both attachment and authenticity, and both are essential for our well-being and our ability to thrive, what happens when these two needs come in direct conflict with each other? This is where the gap between knowing better and doing better really shows up. Because between these two needs, only attachment is tied to our physical survival. And in the realms of needs hierarchy, physical survival ranks supreme. So whenever being our authentic self threatens that attachment to others, especially as dependent young children, the choice, although not a conscious one, is crystal clear. Attachment to the caregiver will win out over authenticity and attachment to self every time. Remember, to a child, the mere thought of losing that parental bond can feel like life or death, because in many ways it is. A harsh look, a dismissive tone, a parent being too distracted to notice, meeting silence when comfort was most needed. These moments can feel deeply threatening to a child. Of course, any big trauma like neglect, abuse, abandonment can be crushing. But we're also learning just how devastating the chronic, subtle, repeated injuries can be. The kind that slowly eat away at a child's sense of self over time. They can be just as damaging, if not more so. Still, even those seemingly small, unintentional hurts can make our authentic self feel unsafe. No matter how these wounds occur, the message to our parts is the same. If I'm not lovable, if I get rejected, I won't survive. This is one of the earliest ways that gap between knowing better and doing better gets wired in, because a part of you has learned that protecting the attachment to others matters more than acting on what you know is true and aligned for you. And so these beautiful, authentic parts of ourselves get sacrificed. Some get shut down and locked away completely, while others don't fully disappear. They simply hide the aspects that feel unsafe, while twisting the rest into a more extreme, what IFS calls protective role. So if a playful, spontaneous, carefree part learns it's not safe to be its authentic self, it might turn into the entertainer or the people pleaser. A sensitive, deeply emotional part might learn to hide its tears and become a fixer or a caretaker. Sometimes a whole new part shows up and takes on a new extreme protector role. Either way, our authentic self gets rejected, and suddenly our scared little part is flying solo, living by strategies designed for survival instead of wholeness and free expression. And it might surprise you just how many ways these strategies can show up. Some parts can become absolute control freaks, preemptively trying to manage everything around you, including you. They never rest, always working a way to keep you safe in an effort to prevent rejection or failure. They're that perfectionist that always has to get it right, the worrier that never stops scanning for danger, the people pleaser working overtime to keep everyone happy, and they're that brutal inner critic so quick to tear you down before anyone else gets the chance. Other parts flare up the moment painful feelings break through. They'll do almost anything to avoid or numb the discomfort. They're the distraction seeker, pulling you into scrolling or busyness, the comfort eater or drinker reaching for relief, or the angry defender that pushes people away so you don't have to feel so vulnerable. And then there are the parts that block you altogether. Like an internal gatekeeper, they shut down access to your feelings and memories deemed too painful or unsafe. Though sometimes they'll do this under the guise of a healthy role, like the spiritual seeker or the positive thinker, as a way to keep you from going too deep. But these are just a few examples. You'll want to discover and get to know all the different ways these parts show up for you, because it's going to really help you work with them and heal. I'll talk more about how you do that later in the video, but I've also created a handout that includes 20 of these parts showing both their healthy roles and expressions and how they show up when they take on their distorted extreme roles, to help you start recognizing them in your own life and begin making choices from a place of clarity instead of your maladaptive parts. You'll find a link for that handout in the video description below. Now, most of us carry not just one, but many of these maladaptive, what IFS would call burdened parts. And with so many different parts at play, each with their own agendas, each fighting for their survival, it can feel like a real battlefield raging inside, especially when protective strategies clash in direct opposition to each other. That's when that relentless tug-of-war begins. One part yells, "Keep performing or you'll lose their approval." Another screams back, "Stay small, don't draw attention, it's too dangerous out there." We feel the conflict, but we mistake it for ourselves, as if this chaos is a reflection of who we are. It feels real, it feels true, it even feels like us, because we don't realize there's a whole inner cast of characters here, each scrambling to keep us safe in its own misguided, conflicting way. We identify with whichever voice is the loudest in the moment. So when a part gets triggered and kicks into high gear, we think we're broken or bad. When multiple parts fight, we think we're the problem, our own worst enemy. But the truth is we're none of these things. We feel divided because our parts are divided. In fact, they've been traumatized. Gabor Mate, widely recognized as a leading expert on trauma, explains that trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. It's the disconnection from the self. That's where the real wound lives. And that's exactly what's happened with these parts. They cut themselves off from the self when connecting to it no longer feels safe. And from then on, they carry the burden of survival alone. And it's a brutal, scary existence. Cut off from the self's balanced perspective, they're left trapped in their own narrow, skewed view of the world. They become frozen in time, stuck at the age we were when the role was created, still seeing the world through the lens they had back when we were 5 or 10 or 15. They never mature past that point, so never develop any new improved coping skills. Instead, they cling to their protective role with dear life, convinced their outdated strategies are the only thing standing between us and disaster. Because they also don't realize that we've continued to grow, that we're an adult now, no longer dependent on our caregivers to get our needs met, that the danger has long since passed. So they continue to fight the fight, exhausted, feeling misunderstood and underappreciated, playing a role they never wanted to play but felt they had to, a role that no longer serves us, but at the time was the absolute best they could do, and very well may have saved us. These parts have the very best of intentions. They're desperately trying to help, trying to keep us safe, even if it costs them everything. They may be trying to help, but the problem is they're doing it from disconnection, from outside the self. And that's why we can feel like someone else is driving the bus, like we're out of control, out of alignment, not really choosing. The rogue part is running the show, and the self is absent. It's important to remember that in their healthy form, these protector parts are expressions of the higher authentic self, extensions of its wisdom, creativity, strength, and care. They help us navigate the world with awareness and adaptability. That's why these parts don't need to be controlled, corrected, or shamed. They need to come back home, to be reconnected with self, to truth, to their original healthy, authentic role and expression. Again, the problem is not the existence of parts, it's their fragmentation. Trauma and fear have severed them. Integration is the process of bringing them back into the whole. The self, with a capital S, what I call the higher self, is the part of us that has always been and always will be. The part directly connected to Source, God, the divine, one consciousness, whatever you call it. This isn't the same as our thinking brain or executive functioning. We do have parts that think logically, Plan carefully, manage schedules, and set boundaries. And when those parts are healthy, they're connected to the self and take their cues from it. But the higher self is different. It's our spiritual essence, our wisdom, our deepest guide, the part of us that's not run by ego, not susceptible to fear or distortion. It's a calm, steady presence that's in no hurry to fix or force, no hurry to prove or achieve, no need to get anywhere. It simply creates space filled with awareness, clarity, and compassion. And from this space flows a quiet confidence rooted in self-trust and a deep knowing that we could never truly be broken or alone. This gives us and our parts the courage to stop forcing and proving our way through life, to finally follow our heart and walk boldly through this world as the full, authentic expression of who we are. And perhaps most beautiful of all, at the core of this courage is pure, unconditional love that offers safety without conditions, belonging without performance, that meets each part exactly as it is and gently calls it home. This is the presence our parts have been waiting for, the wise, evolved parent that allows them to soften, set down their burdens, and remember who they really are. This is why integration is the key to not only healing and thriving, but breaking those nasty patterns that are keeping you stuck, and why your higher self is the one to lead the way. So how do we do that? In those moments when a protective part surfaces, carrying its fears, defenses, and outworn strategies, what it needs most isn't to be argued with or pushed away. It needs to feel safe, to be seen, acknowledged for how hard it's been working to protect you, even if its ways aren't serving you anymore. This is where you pause, you breathe, and before you do anything else, check in with yourself. Are you in your higher self right now? Self-energy feels calm, open, curious, compassionate. It has no urgency to fix or control. If you notice judgment, frustration, or the impulse to push this part away, that's a sign another part is trying to manage it. That's your cue to pause again. Breathe deeper, notice the new part's presence, and turn towards it with openness and curiosity. Ask it for some space and cooperation without forcing. Check in with your state again. If you feel more open and spacious, you can now either connect with the original intended part or continue with the new one if it still needs your attention. Either way, you meet it from self with the calm, clarity, and compassion it's been waiting for. You might silently thank it for everything it's done to keep you safe. You might say, I see you. I know you've been carrying this for a long time. And then gently, you begin to ask, what do you want me to know? What would help you feel safer? What do you need from me right now? You're not here to force it to change. You're here to connect with it and to create enough safety that it can set down its burden, even if for a moment, and begin to trust you. That's how integration begins, not with pressure, but with presence and acceptance. Now, as you listen, you might notice a part begin to shift, sometimes only slightly, sometimes in a way you can feel in your whole body. It may soften, it may go quieter, or it may still hold on tightly at first. That's okay. Your job isn't to pry the burden from its hands, but to keep showing up with patience and understanding. If it's willing, you can ask where in your body it feels most present. Notice any sensations. The tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, the pressure in your throat, and simply let it know you're there with it. No fixing, no rushing, just being with it. Over time, as this part feels truly seen and safe, it may start to share more. The story it's been holding, the moment it took on its role, the fear it's been guarding against. You don't need to analyze or solve these things in the moment. Simply witnessing them is part of the healing. And when the part is ready, you can gently invite it to consider what it might feel like to rest, to set the burden down, even just for now. Some parts will accept, other parts may not yet. Either way, you've begun building trust, and trust is the bridge that allows all of you to come back together as one integrated being. As that trust grows, our parts begin to relax and loosen their grip on their need to control. Bit by bit, they begin to feel lighter. As they release their role and allow the self to take the lead, they can return to their natural roles, offering their perspectives, gifts, and expressions in ways that align with your deepest values and the wisdom of your highest knowing. From that integrated place, you no longer need to monitor which parts are active. You simply feel yourself moving as a cohesive whole. All that lashing out, the overdoing, the people-pleasing, the shrinking, the avoiding, those unhealthy habits and self-sabotaging patterns you couldn't seem to change, start to dissolve. They were being driven by fragmented, distorted parts that were cut off from their true nature. They didn't know it was safe to choose differently. They didn't know they had another option. But once these parts return home to their healthy, authentic expression, are aligned and working together under the leadership of your higher self, every part of you instinctively chooses in harmony with your deepest wisdom and for the good of the entire inner family system. And that's when Maya Angelou's words start ringing true. Because when all of our parts are integrated and know better, we naturally do better. I hope you found this helpful. Before you go, don't leave without grabbing your free Recognizing Your Inner Parts handout. It includes 20 inner parts showing both their healthy expressions and their distorted extreme roles, so you can start spotting them in your own life. The link's right in the description below. And if this kind of insight resonates with you, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.